On the windswept shores of Willow Bay, in a town where every window held a story, one frightened golden puppy waited unclaimed, overlooked a silent shadow in a world too busy to notice. But when a lonely boy named Jack crossed paths with this gentle soul, neither could have guessed how their quiet bond would spark a wave of hope, healing, and second chances for an entire community. What secret did Sonny's old collar hold, and how could the smallest acts of kindness change so many lives? Stay with us because the next chapters of this journey will warm your heart and remind you that every life, no matter how lost, can shine again. The sun had barely crested the horizon when a thick silvery fog rolled in from the Atlantic, smudging the edges of Willow Springs into something half remembered and half dreamed. It was late autumn in this small coastal town in Maine, and the wind always seemed to smell of salt and pine needles. Streets curved around weathered clapboard houses, and the sea seemed never far away, a constant hush behind everything. Most mornings, the townsfolk could be found on their porches with mugs of coffee bundled in sweaters, nodding politely, but rarely lingering. Willow Springs was a place where time moved slow, and hearts once broken took their time to heal. On the north edge of town, just past the old railroad tracks, sat the Willow Springs Animal Shelter, a squat cinder block building with a faded blue sign and a rickety wooden ramp up to the front door. The shelter was always busy after summer. Families came searching for kittens or puppies hoping to fill the approaching winter with some new warmth. Yet there was always one or two animals left behind after the crowds faded overlooked in favor of younger, cuter, or simpler cases. On this chilly, fog-bound morning, 13-year-old Jack Foster stood on the cracked sidewalk outside the shelter, hands jammed deep in his hoodie pockets. He was tall for his age, with a mop of unruly brown hair, and eyes that seemed too old, too thoughtful for a boy just starting 8th grade. Jack's face bore the subtle tiredness of someone who'd grown used to change. His chin was sharp. His shoulders sloped inward as if to make himself smaller in the world. He wore jeans that were a shade too short, evidence of a recent growth spurt, and faded sneakers that had once been white. Jack was quiet almost painfully, so a boy who watched before he spoke. Since the accident last spring that had taken his father, Jack and his mother had moved twice, each time landing a little farther from the life they had known. Willow Springs was supposed to be a fresh start, but to Jack, it mostly felt like another page torn out of an old diary. His mother, Sarah Foster, waited beside him, her hand resting lightly on his back. Sarah was in her late 30s, but looked older this morning, her frame slim but sturdy shoulders squared beneath a faded green raincoat. She was average height with chestnut hair pulled back in a loose bun, and dark circles beneath her hazel eyes hinted at sleepless nights. Sarah was the sort of woman who smiled at strangers in the grocery store, quick to offer a helping hand. But since her husband's death, a kind of softness had wrapped itself around her like a shawl, gentle but distant, as if she was living half in the present, half in memory. She'd always been hopeful, resilient, and determined to protect her son from further pain. The move to Willow Springs and her decision to encourage Jack to volunteer at the animal shelter were both attempts to build something new from the pieces left behind. Inside the shelter, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and wet fur. The place was managed by Mrs. Eunice Webb, a round-cheeked woman in her early 60s with snowy white hair, cropped short and sharp like a cloud that had run into a hedge trimmer. She wore thick glasses perched halfway down her nose and had a brisk, practical air, moving from pen to pen, with a clipboard in hand and a quiet word for every creature in her care. Mrs. Webb was famously no-nonsense, her voice gravelly from years of yelling over barking dogs and calling after straying cats. She liked things neat, scheduled, and predictable, a survival skill learned from decades of managing chaos. Yet, despite her tough demeanor, the townspeople knew her heart was tender, especially for the shelter's forgotten animals. Jack followed his mother through the maze of kennels, their footsteps echoing on the tile. Puppies yipped, cats mewed, a senior hound snored in the back. But one kennel near the window was quiet. There, curled up on a threadbare blanket, lay Sonny, the golden retriever puppy, who had become something of a legend at the shelter for all the wrong reasons. At first glance, Sonny seemed smaller than most Goldens his age, his coat a warm, dappled gold that faded to cream around his paws and belly. His ears flopped forward, giving him a permanently inquisitive look, and his nose was dusted with pale freckles. But what drew the eye, and what drove most adopters away, was his left eye clouded a milky blue, a birth defect that left him half blind. His right eye, though, was bright and amber, holding a gentle intelligence, always watchful. Sonny rarely barked, never begged for attention. Instead, he seemed to shrink in the corner when people passed, observing quietly his tail curled protectively around his legs. Mrs. Webb appeared, her sneakers squeaking slightly on the wet floor. "He's a quiet one, that Sonny," she said, glancing from Jack to Sarah with a hint of apology. "Had a rough start, poor pup. Most folks want a dog who jumps right into their arms. Sonny needs a little more time is all." Jack crouched by the wire door, fingers threading through the cold metal. He studied Sonny closely, noting how the puppy's gaze flicked from his face to his mother's and back again, cautious but not unfriendly. "Does he like people?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Webb shrugged her lips, quirking in a rueful smile. "He likes who he likes. Never caused any trouble, just waits. Sometimes I wonder if he's waiting for someone in particular." She glanced away, perhaps embarrassed by her own sentiment. Sarah knelt beside her son, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You know, Jack, sometimes the quiet ones have the most to say if you're patient enough to listen." Jack nodded, still watching Sonny. There was something about the little dog that reminded him of himself, both newcomers, both cautious, both a little lost. The moment stretched quiet and unhurried until Mrs. Webb stood. "You two take your time. Let me know if you want to meet any of the others." She bustled off toward the office, leaving Jack and Sarah in the hush of the kennel. Elsewhere in the shelter, another presence prowled the shadows. Milo, an elderly gray tabby cat with a notched ear and the gait of a retired prizefighter. Milo, who'd lived at the shelter longer than any animal on record, spent his days sleeping on the windowsill or padding silently between the cages. He'd survived frostbite and a tumble with a raccoon, wore his scars with grumpy pride, and trusted humans only as far as he could see them. Yet he tolerated Sonny occasionally sharing a sunny spot with the little dog in the afternoon, the two companions in exile. As the morning wore on, the shelter grew busier, families arriving to adopt children, laughing, a sense of anticipation in the air. Jack lingered by Sonny's kennel, watching as other dogs leaped and barked for attention. Sonny remained still, his good eye never leaving Jack. The boy felt a strange ache in his chest, a tug of something that felt like recognition. Outside, the fog was beginning to lift, letting shafts of sunlight warm the cracked pavement. Sarah checked her watch, touching Jack's arm gently. "We should go soon, honey. School starts in half an hour." Jack hesitated, looking from his mother to Sonny and back again. As they left, Jack glanced over his shoulder one last time. Sonny hadn't moved, but his tail thumped softly against the blanket just once, as if to say, "I see you." The world outside seemed both colder and brighter as Jack and his mother walked home. Willow Springs was waking up, seagulls wheeling overhead, the clang of a bell from the bakery, the distant whistle of the 8 a.m. train. But Jack felt that somehow a tiny golden light had begun to glow in the quiet corners of his heart. That afternoon, Jack started his first day at Willow Springs Middle School. The building was squat and red-bricked, its windows fogged with condensation. In the crowded hallways, Jack kept his head down, dodging clusters of kids who already seemed to know their places in the world. His homeroom teacher, Ms. Daniels, was brisk but kind, a tall woman with cropped gray hair and a habit of clapping her hands for attention. Jack took a seat at the back, feeling invisible. He barely spoke to anyone, and at lunch he ate alone under the maple tree behind the gym, his sandwich tasting of homesickness. As the sun set, painting the sky a bruised pink, Jack sat at his bedroom window, watching the clouds drift over the sea. He thought of Sonny, waiting in the shelter, silent and watchful. Somehow, knowing the little dog was out there, another misfit waiting for a place to belong, made Jack feel a little less alone. On Saturday morning, Willow Springs was wrapped in a sleepy mist, the world soft-edged and quiet, as if the town had pulled a blanket over its head. The scent of cinnamon rolls drifted from the bakery on Main Street, mixing with the briny tang of the sea. Jack Foster woke early, the sunlight shyly filtered through his curtains. He hesitated a moment at the window, watching a flock of gulls wheel and argue over the docks, before turning away to dress in his favorite faded blue shirt and clean jeans. Downstairs, Sarah Foster was already up, standing in the kitchen with her back straight and a determined look set into her features. She was spooning oatmeal into 2 bowls and humming under her breath, her eyes brighter than they had been for weeks. Sarah, though still slim and pale from months of worry, was making a conscious effort to build new rituals for Jack and herself. Small things like breakfast together and Saturday chores. After the accident, she had learned to hold on to the ordinary as tightly as she could, As Jack ate, she sat across from him and tried to smile through her own nerves. "You ready?" Sarah asked, voice gentle as Jack rinsed his bowl. She put a hand on his shoulder, her fingers cool but reassuring. "It'll be good for you. You might even make a friend or two." Jack nodded, half listening more, focused on the thought of seeing Sunny again. The world outside felt less intimidating, if there was at least one creature who understood what it meant to wait. The shelter looked different in the daylight, brighter, more alive. Mrs. Webb greeted them at the door, her white hair sticking up in tufts like a startled owl's. Today she wore a maroon cardigan dotted with silver dog pins and thick corduroy pants, her clipboard tucked under one arm. She eyed Jack with the assessing look of someone measuring a suit for fit. "Glad to see you back, Jack," she said briskly. "Most kids your age come, once get bored and vanish. You staying for a shift?" Jack nodded, and Mrs. Webb handed him a name badge with volunteer written in block letters. "You'll be helping with feeding and some cleaning today. Start with the back kennels. Oh, and keep an eye out for Milo. He gets grumpy when it's cold." She led him through a short hallway lined with posters about pet adoption and animal care. In the back corridor, Jack caught sight of Milo. The elderly gray tabby perched atop a shelf near a sunny window. The cat's tail flicked like a metronome, his green eyes sharp even in his old age. Milo was a legend for his stubbornness. He'd clawed a town councilman last spring, and now had an entire shelf of toys to himself. Despite his reputation, Milo watched Jack with an unreadable expression, neither welcoming nor warning, simply observing the boy's clumsy attempts to fill water bowls and scoop kibble. Jack tried a cautious, "Hey, Milo," and was rewarded with a slow, blinking stare. As Jack finished his rounds, he stopped outside Sunny's kennel. The golden puppy was sitting upright today, less curled than before, his one bright eye following Jack's every movement. The sun caught on his fur, making him seem almost to glow amid the shelter's dull palette. Jack knelt down, careful not to startle the dog, and watched as Sunny inched closer, nose twitching. "Hey there, Sunny," Jack whispered, feeling his nerves settle. "It's me again." The two studied each other, a silent conversation. Neither quite knew how to finish. After a moment, Jack noticed something he hadn't, before a battered leather collar loose around Sunny's neck. Its brass tag was dulled with age, but when the light hit just right, Jack could make out faint words engraved along the edge. "If you're reading this, I once made someone smile." The message felt like a secret only he was meant to discover. Jack reached through the bars, letting his fingers rest near the tag, but not grabbing it. Sunny edged forward, his good eye wide with curiosity, and Jack felt a spark of hope flicker in his chest. "Did you?" Jack asked quietly. "Did you make someone smile?" For the first time, Sunny pressed his head against Jack's hand, a simple gesture that felt heavier than any words. The moment was interrupted by a cheerful voice. "He likes you, you know." Jack looked up to see Maya Ramirez, a girl around his age, watching from the next kennel, over. Maya had warm brown skin, black hair pulled into two braids, and wore a bright yellow jacket dotted with enamel pins of cartoon cats. Her eyes sparkled with a confidence Jack envied. "I help out on weekends," she explained, leaning on the doorframe. "Sunny never comes this close for anyone. Most people say he's broken, but I think he's just picky." Maya was a whirlwind, quick to laugh, quicker to offer help, the sort of person who always found something to smile about. She lived 2 streets over and loved animals, especially those with a bit of trouble in their past. Jack smiled shyly, feeling himself relax. "He's different," he offered. Maya grinned. "Aren't we all?" She introduced Jack to her routine, how to fill out adoption cards, how to change bedding, the best way to dodge Mrs. Webb's inspections. With Maya beside him, the shelter felt less daunting, less lonely. Later that day, as the morning sun chased the last of the mist from the windows, Sarah returned to pick Jack up. She lingered in the lobby, chatting with Mrs. Webb about local shops and weather patterns, her body language open, but still careful. Sarah had a knack for conversation, her voice warm and calm, the sort that made people feel at ease even when she wasn't sure of herself. Jack tugged her sleeve as she finished her conversation. "Mom," he began, heart pounding. Could we maybe adopt?" Sunny Sarah hesitated, glancing toward the kennel. She saw the hope in her son's eyes, the first real hope since their move. Mrs. Webb, overhearing, stepped in. "He's a good dog. Needs someone gentle, someone patient. It'll take work." Sarah nodded, considering. "Let's meet him, just us," she said. Inside the kennel, Sunny stayed back at first, wary but not afraid. Sarah crouched low, extending her hand palm up. Her patience paid off. Sonny approached in his own time, sniffing her fingers before sitting his golden fur brushing her knee. Sarah smiled, and for a moment, the tension in her shoulders slipped away. They spent a long time there, talking softly, letting Sonny come to them on his terms. When they left, Sarah's eyes were damp but shining. "Let's fill out the paperwork," she said quietly, surprising both herself and Jack. That afternoon, as Jack sat in the back seat with Sonny curled beside him, papers signed, a new leash coiled in his lap. He watched the world pass by in gold and blue. He felt the weight of the collar in his palm, the message lingering in his mind. "If you're reading this, I once made someone smile." Jack looked at Sonny, then at his mother in the front seat, and for the first time since their arrival in Willow Springs, he felt as though the pieces of his life might fit together again. In the rearview mirror, Sarah caught his eye and offered a small, proud smile. Jack squeezed Sonny gently and closed his eyes, letting the soft, warm fur anchor him to this new beginning. That night in their quiet home by the sea, Sonny circled his new bed 3 times before curling up in a tight, trusting ball. Jack watched him for a long time, feeling something like belonging settle in the room, a feeling that for the first time in a long while, they might all be home. The first days with Sonny in the Foster household unfolded beneath a stretch of clear November skies. Willow Springs had shed its mist for a run of crisp air sunlight, glinting off the window panes and tracing patterns on the hardwood floors. The ocean, visible from the Foster kitchen, if you craned your neck just so, was steel blue and calm, dotted with the occasional sailboat braving the late autumn chill. For Jack, the house felt quieter than ever before, despite the presence of a new companion. Sonny, small and golden, with his cloudy left eye, and that perpetually gentle gaze, moved like a ghost through the rooms, soft-footed, silent, rarely venturing out of the corner near the living room radiator. His fur, still a little thin around his flanks, from his time at the shelter, caught the morning sun and glowed faintly, but his tail hardly wagged. He made almost no sound even when Jack tried to coax him with toys or a gentle, "Come here, boy." The only exception was a soft whine in the dead of night, barely audible through the walls, as if he were searching for someone he'd lost in a dream. Sarah Foster was patient, remembering what Mrs. Webb had said about giving Sonny time. She was practical by nature, tending to structure each day with routines and lists. But now she found herself inventing new ones to help Sonny adjust, laying out a soft blanket, setting his water bowl close to where he seemed most comfortable, and placing a gentle hand on his back when he allowed it. Though slim and often tired, Sarah's movements were always careful around Sonny, her voice soft. She'd learned from grief not to rush what was fragile, and in Sonny's hesitant steps, she saw something of her own slow return to hope. Meals were the greatest struggle. Sonny would sniff his bowl, sometimes nudge it, but often he'd just curl up and lay his head on his paws, watching Jack with mournful patience. Jack tried everything, chicken broth drizzled over kibble, hand-feeding, even sitting beside him for long stretches in silence. Still, Sonny ate little, his appetite held hostage by worry and the strangeness of a new place. The house itself was a modest 2-story shingled gray and trimmed in white, its garden rimmed with a low stone wall and a narrow path to the side gate. It was there 3 days after Sonny arrived that Jack met Martha Greeley, the neighbor who lived alone in the weathered cottage next door. Martha was in her late 70s, a small woman with a crown of curly white hair and a tendency to wear oversized sweaters in shades of lavender and rose. Her blue eyes sparkled behind thick glasses, and her walk, though slowed by age, was steady and purposeful. Martha had a warmth that crept up slowly like the heat from a sunbeam, but her words carried the blunt honesty of someone who'd seen enough life not to waste time on small talk. Jack first noticed Martha leaning over the low fence, her hands tucked into the pockets of her cardigan, as she watched him try to coax Sonny into the yard. "That's a patient little fellow you've got there," she called out, her voice bright with a faint New England lilt. "Reminds me of another Golden I knew once." Jack, shy around adults, but curious despite himself, managed a small wave. "He's still getting used to things," he replied, glancing at Sonny, who sat pressed against the house, eyes wide and wary. Martha nodded, understanding in her gaze. "Takes time, doesn't it? All the best things do." She paused, then smiled. "I made some oatmeal raisin cookies. You look like you could use a pick-me-up. Come over if you like." That afternoon, Jack visited Martha's kitchen, a cozy space crowded with teapots, photographs in faded frames, and a window ledge stuffed with flowering violets. Martha moved with surprising energy, bustling about to pour tea and arrange cookies on a blue china plate. She offered Jack the best chair, a battered rocker near the stove, and settled herself across from him. Between bites of cookie, Jack learned snippets about Martha's life. She'd been widowed many years before, and her only grandson Eli had disappeared when he was 17, run away or lost, she never quite said. The old woman's voice softened when she mentioned Eli, and Jack noticed she sometimes stared out the window, as if expecting to see him walking up the path. He had a golden retriever too, you know. Name was Buddy, smartest dog you ever met, loyal as the day is long, her face creased with memory, half a smile, half a sigh. Jack listened, drawn by the way Martha spoke of Buddy, how the dog would greet Eli at the door, follow him to the lake, even wait outside the store until he came back. When Buddy passed, Eli was never quite the same, Martha confessed, looking down at her hands. Some animals, they leave a hole you don't know how to fill. Back home, Jack told Sarah about Martha's stories. Sarah nodded, understanding the ache beneath them. She had grown up with dogs herself. Her first, a shaggy mutt named Daisy, had slept at the foot of her childhood bed until the day she left for college. Give Sonny time, she reminded Jack. He'll find his way to us. At school, Jack's days remained lonely but manageable. He'd begun exchanging shy nods with Maya Ramirez, who sometimes waved across the cafeteria. Still, he often rushed home, eager to see if Sonny had ventured from his usual corner. Each day brought small progress. Sonny venturing a little farther, sniffing at the open back door, watching birds through the window, with growing curiosity. One rainy evening, as Jack sat on the floor with his homework, Sonny surprised him by crossing the room and sitting close, just near enough for Jack to feel his warmth. For a while, neither moved. Jack, feeling bold, rested his hand lightly on Sonny's back, and the little dog didn't pull away. Outside, the rain pattered steadily, and the house felt less empty than it had in weeks. Milo, the old shelter cat, made his presence known one afternoon when Sarah visited the shelter to drop off some blankets. She found Milo curled on the front desk, looking regal despite his battered ear and clouded eye. Mrs. Webb, who doted on the cat, despite her grumbling, explained that Milo had lived through more winters than anyone could count and seemed to have a sixth sense for lonely souls. If your Sonny's anything like Milo, he'll bloom on his own time, Mrs. Webb remarked, smoothing the cat's fur. By the end of the week, Jack found himself sharing more with Martha, stories of his father, his old house, even his struggles at school. Martha listened without interruption, offering only the occasional nod or gentle encouragement. Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who's not in your family, she observed, or to a dog who listens better than most people. Sonny's progress was slow, but real. By the 7th day, he began to eat with more enthusiasm, tail twitching slightly when Jack approached with his bowl. He no longer flinched at sudden noises, and one morning, Jack caught him sleeping belly up, in a patch of sunlight legs, sprawled in a rare moment of puppy abandon. On Sunday afternoon, Jack, Sarah, and Sonny took a short walk along the bluff overlooking the sea. Sarah bundled in her favorite old scarf, watched as Sonny sniffed the salt air, his golden coat ruffling in the breeze. For the first time, the little dog paused to look up at Jack, tongue lolling, and wagged his tail, a brief shining moment that made Jack grin so widely his cheeks hurt. That night, as the stars wheeled above Willow Springs, Jack wrote in his journal, "Sonny is still scared, but he's trying. Martha says the bravest ones are the quietest. Maybe she's right." The first cold snap of December arrived with little warning, frosting the window panes of Willow Springs and turning the narrow streets brittle and blue in the morning light. School felt sharper these days. Jack trudged up the sidewalk with his collar turned against the wind, clutching his backpack and hoping each day would pass quickly. 8th grade had never been easy, but here it felt lonelier. The friend groups already carved in stone, every joke a reminder that he didn't quite belong. One gray Monday, Jack found himself the target of a group of boys in the locker-lined hallway. The ringleader, Trevor Pike, was a broad-shouldered kid with sandy hair, an easy smirk, and a voice that cut through the noise. Trevor, a fixture on the soccer team, wore his Letterman jacket with casual pride and relished the attention of his group. "Hey, Foster, nice shoes. Did you borrow those from a clown?" Laughter followed. Jack flushed, ducking his head and hurrying past, heart pounding. Maya Ramirez caught up to him near the science wing, her braids swinging. "Don't let them get to you," she said, her tone brisk but sympathetic. Maya was small but fierce, her confidence as bright as her neon sneakers. She walked beside Jack, ignoring the taunts, her presence a quiet shield. "People in this town stick to their cliques. You'll find your people." Jack tried to believe her, but the ache lingered as the day dragged on. When the final bell rang, Jack hurried home through slushy puddles. The house glowed with golden lamplight, warmth curling through the rooms. Sarah was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, kneading bread dough with steady hands. She'd found a rhythm in baking, a calming task that filled the house with the scent of yeast and cinnamon. Her cheeks were rosy from the oven heat, and she hummed softly an old tune from her childhood. She smiled at Jack, but her eyes flickered with concern when she saw his hunched shoulders. "Rough day?" Jack shrugged. "It's nothing." He retreated to his room, leaving his mother to her quiet worry. Upstairs, Jack found Sonny waiting by the window, head tilted one ear, perked as if listening for Jack's footsteps. The golden dog had grown more comfortable at home. He now roamed the house freely, sometimes pausing to sniff at the doors or nudge his food bowl toward Jack when he was hungry. Sonny's fur was thicker, his eyes brighter. Yet, when Jack slumped down beside his bed, Sonny seemed to sense something was wrong. The dog padded over and sat quietly, then gently laid his head on Jack's knee. The simple weight of Sonny's trust eased the knot in Jack's chest. For a long moment, boy and dog stayed that way, silent in their shared understanding. Jack absently stroked Sonny's head, and his fingers brushed the old leather collar. For the first time, he noticed that the brass tag had another side scuffed and faded by years of wear. He turned it carefully in the light from his desk lamp, squinting to make out the faint traces of an engraving, just a few letters and maybe a name half lost to time. His curiosity flared. What story did this collar carry, who had first fastened it around Sonny's neck? Downstairs, Sarah called him to dinner, simple chicken soup and a heel of fresh bread. She listened as Jack hesitantly described the collar's strange second engraving. Sarah, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, considered the puzzle. Maybe Mrs. Webb at the shelter would have some records, she suggested. Or you could ask Martha. She seems to know a lot about the dogs in this neighborhood. Sarah's face softened as she spoke, her tiredness for a moment replaced by a spark of her old curiosity. She was always gentle with Jack's questions, never brushing them aside, even on her busiest days. That night, as the wind rattled the shutters, Jack lay awake thinking about Sonny's past. He wondered if the dog remembered the name on that tag, if somewhere inside those wise amber eyes, old memories still flickered. He resolved to ask Martha the next day. Martha Greeley, the neighbor, was in her garden the following afternoon, bundled in a green coat and thick wool hat, her hands busy pruning her dormant rose bushes. The air was sharp, but Martha's cheeks were bright and her eyes clear as she welcomed Jack to the gate. "Out on a mystery, are we?" she teased, noticing the collar in his hand. Martha listened closely as Jack explained his discovery, her face growing thoughtful. "Let's take a look then." She examined the tag, turning it over with careful fingers. "That's old work," she mused. "Could be from years ago. My Eli's dog Buddy wore a tag just like that, though his had Eli's initials. Hard to say." She handed the collar back, her gaze distant. Sometimes a dog's past is like a river, it keeps moving, but the stones underneath remember every step. Jack thanked her, feeling both frustrated and intrigued. Meanwhile, in the foster kitchen, Sarah had begun volunteering for the local Meals on Wheels program. She'd met a handful of neighbors through the work, a lively nurse named Wendy, with a bouncing laugh, and a grizzled Vietnam veteran, Mr. Clark, who kept his hair in a tight gray ponytail. The stories she brought home gave Jack glimpses into lives lived quietly alongside their own. Sarah's confidence was growing, her old warmth seeping back as she found purpose helping others. She often returned with recipes shared by grateful seniors or news of a new pet that needed a home. Back at school, Maya remained Jack's one steadfast ally. She invited him to join her after class at the town's tiny library, a brick building with creaky floors and a kindly librarian, Mrs. Dalton. Mrs. Dalton was a woman in her late 50s, short and sturdy, with curly salt and pepper hair and a fondness for mismatched cardigans. She knew every student's name and always had a stack of recommended books ready. When Jack showed her Sonny's collar, Mrs. Dalton offered to check some local records and promised to ask the library's history group about old pet registrations. "Every tag tells a story," she said, her voice a soothing whisper. "Sometimes you just have to be patient." One evening, as snow began to drift against the window, Jack sat with Martha over tea and cookies. The conversation wandered, as it often did, from Sonny to Buddy to Eli, and finally to Jack's struggles at school. Martha listened without judgment. "People are afraid of what's different," she said quietly. "But the things that make you feel alone are often the things that make you special too. Dogs know that better than anyone." She patted his hand and smiled. "Sonny picked you for a reason, Jack. You're both still learning how to belong." The week ended with a small breakthrough. After another tough day at school, Jack came home slumped by the door and felt Sonny's warm muzzle nudge his hand. The golden dog sat quietly looking up with patient devotion. Jack hugged Sonny, burying his face in the soft fur, and for the first time in months, the tears came silent and cleansing. When he finally looked up, he saw his mother watching from the kitchen, her face soft with understanding. She said nothing, only came to kneel beside them and hug Jack and Sonny both. That night, Jack opened his journal, carefully copying the strange marks from Sonny's collar onto a blank page. He wrote, "Maybe every story starts with a question. We'll find the answer together." By the time the holidays dusted Willow Springs with a thin layer of snow, Jack's curiosity about Sonny's past was growing restless. The mystery of the collar had worked its way into his thoughts, joining him on walks to school and during quiet moments before bed. The letters on the faded tag seemed to call out each time he traced their outline, and with each passing day, Jack became more determined to find the truth. On a Saturday morning that shimmered with pale sunlight, Jack bundled himself in a thick sweater, tugged on his boots, and clipped Sonny's leash. Sonny's coat had grown fuller, almost plush, and his steps, though still careful, had gained a kind of hesitant confidence. The two headed next door, where Martha Greeley was shoveling her walkway. Martha, in a maroon coat and rainbow scarf, looked up with a grin. On a mission today, she asked, handing Jack the spare shovel so he could help clear the steps. After a few minutes of companionable silence, broken only by the soft scrape of shovels and the occasional breath of the wind, Jack showed Martha the collar and the scuffed brass tag. "I can't make out all the letters," he confessed, "but it looks like there might be an E and an L together." "Do you think it could be Eli's?" Martha's face softened, and she reached for her glasses, examining the tag closely beneath the winter sun. "You know, Jack, I think you may be right," she murmured. "Eli always wanted his initials on everything, even Buddy's old collar." She turned the tag over and over in her palm, as if she could coax the years back into focus. "Would you like to see the old house? Maybe there's something there we missed." The old Greeley house sat across the narrow lane, its paint peeling and windows fogged from disuse, but it still had a trim hedge and a brick path Martha insisted on sweeping clean every fall. They crossed together, Martha in her sturdy boots, Jack beside her, and Sonny padding quietly at his heel, nose twitching at the sense of memory and dust. Inside the house smelled faintly of cedar and lost time. The hallway was lined with photos: Martha as a young woman with wind-tossed hair, Eli as a boy with a bright gap-toothed grin, and in many frames a golden retriever pup, smaller than Sonny, but unmistakable in his coloring and expression. Martha pointed with a trembling finger. "That's Buddy, and that's Eli must have been around 10 years old. They were inseparable." She took Jack to a small den filled with sun-faded books and boxes stacked haphazardly beneath the window. "Let's see what we can find." Jack sifted through a box of loose photos, his heart thumping with anticipation. Sonny wandered the room, tail waving slowly, as if sensing that this place had belonged to him once. In one envelope, Jack found a stack of Polaroids: Eli hugging Buddy in the backyard, both boy and dog beaming at the camera. Another of Buddy lying with his head in Eli's lap while the boy read. There, near the bottom, was a faded photo that made Jack pause: a young golden retriever, a white patch over his eye, sitting on a porch step, beside a boy whose arm was thrown around his shoulders. Sonny nosed the photo, whined softly, then licked Jack's hand. Martha leaned over her eyes, wet with memory. That was the summer Eli got his diagnosis. He was different from other kids, quiet, sensitive, sometimes overwhelmed by sounds and crowds. Buddy was the only one who could calm him. They'd sit for hours under the old maple tree, and it was like the world disappeared. When Buddy disappeared a few years later, Eli was heartbroken. "We searched everywhere, but—" She trailed off her breath, catching. Jack felt a strange, comforting weight settle on him. The idea that Sonny had once been Buddy, that he'd been the same dog who'd helped Eli's, made sense in a way that defied logic. He looked at Sonny, who met his gaze with solemn understanding. "Do you remember?" Jack whispered. Sonny wagged his tail, and Martha smiled through her tears. "Sometimes I think dogs remember everything that matters." They spent the afternoon sorting through keepsakes, Eli's favorite books, a box of baseball cards, a small collection of drawings. Buddy had inspired a child's crayon version of a golden retriever chasing butterflies, labeled in uneven handwriting, "My best friend." Martha shared stories about Eli, how he'd struggled in school, how Buddy had helped him find courage to speak in class, how their quiet companionship had drawn out Eli's laughter on days when nothing else could. As the winter afternoon faded, Jack and Martha returned to her kitchen, Sonny following close behind. Martha brewed tea-spicy chai with honey and set out a plate of molasses cookies. "I always hoped Buddy would come back," she admitted softly. "I never thought I'd see that old collar again." Jack reached over and squeezed her hand. "He found his way back," he said. "He found us." At home, Jack showed Sarah the photo of Eli and Buddy. Sarah, slim and thoughtful as always, her brown hair pulled into a loose bun, studied the image, her expression turning tender. He was a therapy dog, before anyone ever called him, that she observed ruffling Sonny's fur. She knelt to hug both Jack and Sonny, at once, her arms gentle but strong. "You're a good team." The next day, Jack brought the photo to school and shared the story with Maya in the library's reading nook. Maya's dark eyes shone with excitement. "That's amazing, Jack. No wonder Sonny is so special. He's got a history, he's been someone's hero before." Mrs. Dalton, the librarian, overheard and smiled as she passed. Dogs like that have a way of finding the right people again and again. From that day on, Jack felt a new sense of pride in his bond with Sonny. He knew their story was part of something larger, a chain of kindness, patience, and quiet bravery that had stretched across years, houses, and hearts. And each time he brushed his fingers over the worn brass tag, Jack felt more certain that the past wasn't lost, only waiting to be remembered. As January dawned over Willow Springs, the snow deepened into pillowy drifts, turning the neighborhood into a landscape of hushed white and silver shadows. Mornings were cold and clear, the kind that made breath puff from your lips in swirling clouds. But inside the Foster house, warmth spread in new and unexpected ways. Jack and Sonny had settled into a rhythm that made the little home feel vibrant, Jack's laughter more frequent. Sonny's golden fur glinting as he bounded from room to room. Even Sarah, who had once moved through her days with careful restraint, now seemed lighter, smiling easily as she brewed coffee or brushed snow from Jack's coat before school. It was during one such morning, as Sarah zipped up Jack's jacket in the hallway, that she noticed how Sonny had become more than just a pet. He was a constant comfort, a gentle shadow who always seemed to know when someone needed quiet company. "You know," she mused, ruffling Sonny's ears, "I've heard about community therapy dog classes. Dogs like Sonny can get trained to visit people who need a little extra happiness." Her voice was warm and bright, and Jack could see the hope there, a flicker of a new beginning. Jack was immediately interested. At school, he'd watched how Sonny responded not just to him, but to others as well. One morning, when Jack's classmate Olivia Mason, an anxious small girl with neat brown braids and oversized glasses, visited their house with her mother to borrow a sled, Sonny had approached Olivia without hesitation. Olivia's mother, Mrs. Mason, was a tall woman with sharp cheekbones, always dressed in practical clothes, and a perpetual look of quiet concern. Olivia tended to shrink from new people and loud noises, but with Sonny, she relaxed, giggling as the dog gently nudged a toy toward her. "He's like magic," she'd whispered to Jack as they watched Sonny chase his tail. Inspired, Sarah researched local programs and found a small therapy dog organization run out of a cozy building near the town green. On a bright Saturday morning, Jack, Sarah, and Sonny bundled up and made their way to the training center, their boots crunching on the icy sidewalk. The building itself was cheerful, its door painted a welcoming blue and a banner reading "Pause and Purpose" fluttering in the wind. Inside the main room was awash in sunlight from tall windows. There were half a dozen other dogs with their owners, a sleepy basset hound named Clementine, a spry border collie called Jasper, and a shy rescue mutt Momo with patchy black fur and one floppy ear. Each owner was introduced by Margaret Goodwin, the program director, a woman in her mid-50s, tall and statuesque, with a mane of gray-streaked auburn hair and a hearty, booming laugh. Margaret's kindness was immediate and genuine. She greeted each newcomer by name and knelt to pet the dogs, her face open and encouraging. Margaret explained the basics of therapy: dog work, how to recognize signs of stress, how to help a dog approach gently, how to ensure both handler and animal felt safe and welcome. She moved through the room, pausing by Jack and Sunny, her eyes twinkling. "This boy has a steady heart," she said, nodding at Sunny. "Therapy work is all about listening sometimes without words. Dogs are naturals." Training sessions became the highlight of the week for Jack. He learned how to guide Sunny through basic obedience, then on to more specialized tasks, sitting calmly while a stranger patted him, lying still, while someone read aloud, even tolerating the occasional crash of dropped books or the shriek of a rolling wheelchair. Jack was patient, his voice gentle, and Sunny seemed to thrive on the new structure, tail wagging as he earned treats and praise. Sarah often stayed chatting with other parents or baking muffins to share with the group. Her warmth drew others in, and she soon became a quiet leader, always ready to help a nervous newcomer. Meanwhile, Martha Greeley was finding her own renewal. Martha, who had spent so many winters with her world narrowed to the kitchen window, and old letters, was drawn out by the infectious energy of Jack and Sunny. At first she hesitated, her hands stiff with age and her heart wary from past losses. But after Jack's invitation, she agreed to join them for a community event at the town library. The library, with its honey-colored wood and softly glowing lamps, was hosting a Read with a Dog afternoon for local children. Martha watched from a corner as Sunny lay on the carpet listening quietly, while a group of children led by Olivia Mason took turns reading picture books. She saw Jack gently encourage Olivia, his shyness replaced by pride as Olivia's voice grew stronger with each page. When a little boy stumbled over a difficult word, Sunny rested his head on the boy's foot, and the boy laughed, nerves forgotten. After the event, Margaret approached Martha, recognizing the older woman from years past. "You're Eli's grandmother, aren't you?" she asked kindly. "I remember Buddy. He was a legend." Martha's eyes shone at the memory, and for the first time in years, she found herself sharing stories in a circle of neighbors, her voice strong and sure. Margaret encouraged her to volunteer at future events, suggesting she help children pick out books or organize crafts. With gentle persistence, Jack and Sarah continued to invite Martha to join their outings, walks in the park, charity bake sales, visits to the animal shelter, where Milo the old cat still dozed in the afternoon sunlight. Martha, in turn, rediscovered her old humor and warmth. She started knitting hats for shelter pets, bringing her famous molasses cookies to every library event, and laughing as Sunny tried to steal them from the plate. For Jack, the change was profound. He saw how Sunny's calm spread to others, how a simple nuzzle or a wag of the tail brightened someone's day. At school, teachers took notice when Jack volunteered to bring Sunny for Mindful Mondays, where students struggling with anxiety could spend a few quiet moments with a therapy dog. Maya Ramirez, ever energetic and supportive, cheered Jack on and even organized a pet photo contest for the class, nominating Sunny as Most Uplifting Spirit. Sarah's confidence grew with each new friend she made, and the old shadows on her face faded. She joined a walking group of local parents and coordinated a winter coat drive, her laughter echoing through the community center. There were still moments of sadness, old memories triggered by certain songs or sights, but these were now softened by the tapestry of new connections. One evening, after a long, happy day of volunteering, Jack sat with Martha and Sarah around the kitchen table. The window glowed with reflected snow, and Sunny lay stretched at their feet. Martha looked around at the small, close circle and sighed contentedly. "You know, I never thought I'd find a place where I could belong again. But this feels right. Like home." Sarah squeezed her hand, and Jack beamed at both women. "Sunny brought us all together," he said simply. That night, as Willow Springs slept under a blanket of moonlit snow, Jack wrote in his journal, "Sunny helps more than just me. I think he helps everyone he meets. Maybe that's his gift." And in the gentle quiet of the house, Sunny dreamed of laughter, warm hands, and the endless healing work of a golden heart. By the end of February, Willow Springs was beginning to thaw, icicles dripping from porch roofs, and the sidewalks bordered by dirty snowbanks, and the hopeful green shoots of early daffodils. The world seemed to be waking up again. In this season of renewal, Sunny's gentle magic reached farther than even Jack had imagined. With his training completed, Sunny wore his new therapy dog vest with a shy dignity. The blue fabric fit snugly over his growing chest, and the little golden retriever, still smaller than most, adult dogs, walked into every room as if he belonged. His left eye remained milky, but his right was keen and warm, ever searching for someone in need. His fur had thickened over winter, and the shadows that once haunted his posture had vanished, replaced with a quiet pride. Jack accompanied Sonny on his visits to Willow Springs Elementary, their first stop on Monday mornings. The school's halls echoed with the usual clatter of sneakers and laughter, but when Sonny arrived, a hush of expectation fell over the library. Miss Thompson, the school counselor, was a slim woman in her early 40s with sandy blonde hair and a habit of wearing bright scarves. She'd championed the therapy dog program, seeing the struggles of children like Oliver Kim, a shy Korean-American boy who flinched at loud noises, or Ella Brooks, who was always alone at recess. Miss Thompson greeted Jack and Sonny with enthusiasm, her bright smile, as much for Jack as for the dog. The children took turns reading stories to Sonny, their voices trembling at first, but growing stronger under his patient gaze. Oliver, small and serious with round glasses and a nervous habit of twisting his shirt, sat cross-legged beside Sonny, reading a picture book about the moon. Sonny listened with a stillness that invited even the most hesitant reader to share a secret or two. One day, as Jack watched Oliver gently pat Sonny's head, he realized he'd stopped counting the seconds until school ended. Maya Ramirez, ever the ringleader, made sure Jack had a seat at her lunch table and introduced him to new friends. The days of lonely sandwiches under the maple tree were over. Sonny's afternoons were spent at Willow Pine's senior home, where his quiet comfort soothed residents like Mr. Whitaker, a tall, silver-haired man with a military-bearing, sharp blue eyes and a booming voice that belied his gentle nature. Mr. Whitaker used to bark orders at the television, but since Sonny began visiting, he waited by the window, a cookie in hand, to greet the golden dog. There was also Mrs. Lila Green, a petite woman in her 80s who wore floral dresses and always had a peppermint tucked in her purse. Lila's arthritis kept her hands curled and stiff, but she could always reach down to scratch behind Sonny's ears. Sonny had an unspoken way of lingering at the feet of those who looked tired or sad, nuzzling a trembling hand, or laying his head in someone's lap. The nurses noticed that even residents who rarely spoke would murmur greetings to Sonny. Jack quickly found himself a part of this new world. He learned the favorite stories of each child, the preferred routes through the senior home. He watched as his mother Sarah bloomed with pride, her cheeks flushed and laughter easy, as she exchanged stories with the other parents, her hands always ready to help push a wheelchair or serve tea. Sarah had grown stronger, her frame still slender, but now filled with purposeful energy. She wore her old navy coat again, the one she hadn't touched since before the accident, and when she walked through the town square with Jack and Sonny, she did so with her head high. Meanwhile, Martha Greeley transformed by her friendship with Jack, and Sonny began to find new purpose. Inspired by their visits and supported by Sarah's gentle encouragement, Martha decided to adopt a pet of her own. At the Willow Springs Animal Shelter, Milo, the ancient shelter cat, a broad-shouldered, patchy-furred tabby, with amber eyes and a grumpy disposition, caught Martha's attention. Milo was at least 15, his ear notched from old battles, and his tail permanently kinked at the end. The staff called him the mayor for his habit of supervising from the front desk, demanding chin scratches and ignoring most attempts at affection. Yet, when Martha entered the room, Milo padded over, and with regal patience allowed her to scratch his chin. Martha laughed a deep, warm sound Jack had never heard before, and decided Milo had chosen her as much as she had chosen him. Martha brought Milo home to her cottage, setting up a basket by the radiator and placing a little ceramic dish with his name painted in blue. Milo settled in with the composure of a seasoned king, occasionally sharing sunbeams with Sonny when Jack and Martha visited each other's homes. Milo didn't fuss about the dog's presence. If anything, he seemed amused by Sonny's boundless goodwill. This new bond between generations, Jack, Martha, and Sarah, their homes, now linked by daily walks and shared meals, wove a kind of safety net through Willow Springs. Jack became a frequent visitor to Martha's house, helping her bake molasses cookies for the senior center, listening to her stories about her late husband or her wild childhood by the Maine coast. Sarah joined them for Sunday dinners, and even Mr. Whitaker and Lila from the senior home would sometimes stop by, always with a treat for Sonny and a crinkly bag of catnip for Milo. At school, Jack's confidence grew. He volunteered for the student council's kindness campaign, suggesting a Pets and Pals event where kids could meet therapy animals. Maya, true to form, organized the decorations, while Oliver and Ella brought snacks and handed out flyers. Sunny was, of course, the star attraction, patiently posing for photos with children who would otherwise have melted into the background. Even Trevor Pike, the former bully, wandered over to scratch Sunny's head, and in a rare moment of honesty, apologized to Jack for his old jokes. "He's a good dog," Trevor said, looking away. "And you're all right, too." Life was not without its challenges. Milo sometimes howled at night or knocked a vase from Martha's table, sending her into fits of giggles. Mr. Whitaker's health wavered, and Sarah had moments of sadness, but the rough edges of each day were softened by community, a patchwork family bound together by love, laughter, and a golden dog who refused to give up on anyone. On a rainy evening in March, as thunder rumbled over Willow Springs, Jack sat with Sunny by the window, Milo curled nearby, and Martha knitting in her rocker. "You know," Martha mused sometimes, "you think the world's too big and cold. But then you meet the right people, or the right animals, and you realize you were never really alone." Sarah set a teapot on the table and smiled. "Sunny brought us all together. He's the bridge we didn't know we needed." And as the storm rattled the glass, Jack leaned his head against Sunny's neck, a gentle golden warmth against the thunder. Outside, the rain fell in silver sheets, but inside light and laughter spilled from every window, a testament to the healing power of friendship, old and new. The morning of Willow Springs' annual Bay Festival dawned bright and clear, with the sea shimmering beneath a sky scrubbed clean by spring rain. All around town, windows were thrown open to let in the sweet scent of new grass and salt, and banners in shades of gold and blue fluttered over Main Street. 1 year had passed since Jack Foster and his mother had arrived here, hearts weary carrying boxes and memories and the hope for a gentler life. Today, everything felt transformed by sunlight, by laughter, and by the golden dog at Jack's side. The house was lively with festival preparations. Sarah, more radiant than she had been in years, moved easily through the kitchen, her slender form wrapped in a soft green dress. Her hair now showing a hint of silver, among the brown was gathered into a loose braid. She hummed as she set out muffins and lemonade, pausing to kiss Jack's forehead as he dashed past a bundle of nervous energy. Her laughter had become a constant music in the house, a gift reclaimed from the quiet sadness she once carried. Sarah had discovered herself anew, in Willow Springs, joining parent groups, leading book drives at the library, hosting potlucks for neighbors. The lines around her eyes were from smiling, and the kindness in her voice, once cautious, was now bold. Jack, now taller, his hair sun-bleached and face tanned, from a year of adventures, moved with a confidence that would have stunned the boy who first arrived. His old shyness had faded, replaced by an easy camaraderie with classmates and neighbors alike. He carried Sunny's therapy vest over one shoulder, his hands busy packing snacks and toys for the Pet and Smile event. Every so often he would kneel to whisper encouragement to Sunny, who responded with a tail thump and a trusting gaze. Jack's world, once narrow and anxious, now felt limitless. Sunny was no longer the small, trembling pup who hid in corners. He moved through the house and neighborhood, with the quiet assurance of someone who belonged, his golden coat gleaming, his gaze gentle and wise. The old cloudy eye had become his trademark. Children called him the dog with the moon eye. Sunny's presence was a balm wherever he went, at the school, the senior center, on walks along the bluff, or at the market where shopkeepers greeted him with biscuits and affection. Even strangers stopped to pet him, drawn by the calm and hope that radiated from him. In every sense, Sunny had become the town's quiet hero. Martha Greeley, once the solitary neighbor behind the rose hedge, was now the beloved grandmother of the block. Her hair was wilder than ever, her voice strong and welcoming, as she organized the cake stall and dispensed hugs with abandon. Milo, her grumpy tabby, had achieved minor celebrity status for his role as co-mascot of the festival. Martha delighted in gathering the children around her for stories, her laughter ringing across the grass as she described Sunny's first clumsy tumble into the bay, or Milo's legendary battle with the festival's balloon arch. The Pet and Smile event, held for the first time at the festival's heart, was a spectacle of color and joy. The town green was a riot of tents and tables, each decorated by the hands of children and their families. Therapy animals of all shapes and sizes, dogs, cats, a retired therapy pony named Butterbean, and even a dignified parrot in a tiny vest mingled with crowds of neighbors. Margaret Goodwin, the therapy dog program's director, moved through the gathering with her usual exuberance, greeting old friends and new arrivals alike. She wore a sun hat decorated with felt paw prints and carried a clipboard covered in thank you notes from grateful families. Sarah helped coordinate the Share Your Story tent, where residents could write about the animals who had changed their lives. Jack and Maya Ramirez, her hair now streaked with electric blue for the occasion, organized games and a best smile contest for pets and people. Miss Thompson from school and Mr. Whitaker from Willow Pines. Senior home greeted each other with surprise, then spent the afternoon sharing stories and laughing over lemonade. Oliver Kim, braver than ever, read aloud to a circle of children, with Sonny stretched at his feet. Ella Brooks painted faces her shy smile, hidden behind whiskers and tiger stripes. At the heart of it all, Sonny moved with steady purpose, greeting each person as if they were the only one in the world. He paused for toddlers leaned gently against the legs of elderly neighbors and lay still as children buried their fingers in his fur. No matter where he went, smiles bloomed in his wake. When the time came for the festival's centerpiece, a parade celebrating animals who heal, Jack was asked to lead with Sonny, wearing a sash painted in gold letters, hope, love, and loyalty. Martha and Milo followed in a little wagon, waving grandly to the crowd, while Sarah and the therapy animals formed a colorful, jubilant procession behind them. As the parade wound its way along the bay, applause broke out in waves. The sun shone on the water, and for a moment, Jack felt the world grow quiet, the noise and bustle falling away, until only the warmth of Sonny pressed against his knee remained. He remembered the ache of those early days, the loneliness, the fear that nothing would ever feel right again, and marveled at how far they had come. He caught Sarah's eye in the crowd and saw pride shining there, and beside her, Martha grinned and blew him a kiss. That night, as lanterns floated over the bay and the festival's laughter faded into dusk, Jack and Sonny sat on the bluff above the water. Sarah and Martha joined them, wrapped in blankets against the cool spring air. Milo prowled the grass, chasing shadows. Willow Springs glowed with light and music, every house lit up, as if celebrating its own private miracle. Jack rested his hand on Sonny's back, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath the fur. "We did it, buddy," he whispered. "You helped all of us find our way home." Sonny leaned closer, the old brass tag shining faintly in the moonlight, a simple testament to all they had overcome. Down below, the festival continued a living bridge between old wounds and new hope. And high on the hill under the quiet gaze of stars, Jack knew that what had started as a small act of kindness had grown into something that would never fade: a family, a town, and a golden dog who had taught them all to believe in healing love and the extraordinary power of being seen. The greatest miracles often begin with a small act of kindness, even a gentle hand reaching out to someone lost or lonely. In Willow Springs, a single golden dog changed not only one boy's life, but brought hope and healing to an entire community. In our everyday lives, we may not realize how much a simple gesture or caring word can mean to someone else. Maybe there's a Sonny in your neighborhood, a neighbor, a pet, a stranger waiting for a little kindness. What would happen if you reached out today? Share your thoughts or your own stories in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring tales. How has an act of kindness, big or small, changed your life? Let us know below and help us spread the light.